Let's see that again. Hey, what's up and welcome back to Full Academy. Now, I want to prevent that from happening to you. So in this episode, I'm going to come out swinging and lead with my most important lesson. Since this channel is about improving how you think so that you can play smarter, I'm going to take on perhaps the biggest obstacle to any player's development, and that's getting bad advice. And it's so important that we go over this because nothing will stunt your growth as much as bad advice will. And I speak from personal experience because had I kept listening to the leaders of my first guild, I would still be spinning my wheels. And with some luck, I might be at 3 or 4 million ranking points by the second year. Now, I'm sure that we all have stories about terrible or silly advice that we've heard from newer players or from bad players. But the focus of this lesson isn't on the bad advice that you get from those people. It's actually the bad advice that you get from players that sort of know what they're doing. In fact, I've seen some really good players, sometimes even top 10 or top 20 players, give really terrible advice to younger players. And if it hasn't already happened to you, then it probably will happen someday, where you're the recipient of a terrible piece of advice from a good player. But if you really understand the key points of this lesson, you'll be able to evaluate that advice, decipher its pros and its cons, and take steps to prevent it from derailing your game. Here is a common question that I've seen asked hundreds of times. Should I build a blank? And you can fill in that blank with terrace farm, contestant estate, blue galaxy, cape, and on and on. Another form of this question would be, is blank good? Is the cape good? Is the blue galaxy good? Is the contestant estate good? Now, this is how bad advice starts, with a bad question like these. So let's take on one of those. Should I build a cape? And that bad question is often followed up with a bad answer like, no, don't build up a cape. Build up your military trio first. Now, before you start screaming about how the cape is a terrific building or that the military trio should definitely come first, let's take a step back and ask why this question is a bad question. And it comes down to poor communication. Should I build a cape is a bad question because it provides no context to help the advisor in providing a good answer. If you asked me whether you should build a cape now, I wouldn't know how to answer that question. Instead, what I'll do, or at least I should do, is take a look at your city, see where you are in your game, and then ask you questions about your goals, your style of play, your guild, etc. And only after I gather as much information as I can, then I'll try to provide you with an answer or recommendation. Now, I can't guarantee that it will be great advice, but at the very least, it will be well thought out advice. And that's really the goal here, to avoid the characteristics of bad advice. And here I list out some of the characteristics of bad advice. In short, bad advice sort of exists in a vacuum. It often takes the form of a statement of fact, like the contestant estate is not worth building, instead of providing a recommendation that considers things here on this list, like strategy, desired playing style, your goals, where the player is at in their development, their situation, what alternatives do they have, what is their opportunity cost, and so on. I want to call out the alternatives piece since I haven't mentioned that yet. A smart decision always considers the alternatives that are available. So going back to the earlier example, it is wrong to say that the contestant estate is not worth building because what if you already have it in your inventory and the alternative is to have an empty plot of land? A more complete recommendation might go something like this. If you are an attack-focused player that is active in GBG and is trying to build up your attack, it might make sense to put down the contestant estate that you already have in inventory rather than leaving that space empty or filling it with a non-attack building like a Shrine of Knowledge. I've also put down developmental stage. Another source of bad advice is that the advisor doesn't consider where the player is at in their city's development. I've heard top 20 players call the contestant estate or the level 2 face of ancients trash because no player in the top 20 has them. But that's really advice for the top 20 players who are focusing more on optimizing their cities and making them more efficient. For new players that have only a few hundred attack boosts and are trying to improve their attack to get more fights, those contestant estates and face of ancients may be great additions. The last one that I want to touch on is opportunity cost. And for this one, I'll use an example from another YouTube channel, Full Elite, which on the surface seems to recommend that newer players not build a cape. And I've seen a lot of comments that argue that this is wrong. But before attacking this recommendation, it's important to understand the context and how Full Elite's argument revolves around opportunity cost. He is not saying that the cape is a bad building. However, what I think he is saying is that if you are a newer player that aspires to be an elite fighter in an elite guild, and you are already getting a decent number of fights in GBG, then you would probably be better served by not building a cape early on and instead investing those forge points in your military grade buildings. That way, you can build up your attack boost, get more fights, and earn more forge point rewards that you can then use to power up and grow your city at a faster rate. That's a long way of saying that this type of player would get a better and quicker return on their investment by investing in their attack. To summarize, I think that the source of a lot of bad advice is poor communication and the lack of context provided by both the questioner and the advisor. The key, I believe, is to ask better questions by providing some of the information that I've mentioned before, like what's your situation, strategy, goals, etc. And then look for the same things in the recommendation, and definitely be especially critical of blanket statements or one-size-fits-all recommendations. So that's it for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to start laying down the fundamentals that will help you to grow your forge point income and power up your city. So don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I'll see you next time.